Hello, hello, and welcome to Coaching Corner with me, Tracy Forsyth. So, this last week I did two workshops in London and in Manchester on influence, and I think it's really one of those things that if I had to pick a skill that's becoming much more valuable in the modern world every year, it would be influence. I mean, it's always been important, hasn't it? Influence, but more and more important. Yeah, not because we're all trying to become influencers. Have you clicked that follow button, etc., etc., but because the way of work has changed. You know, we're leading people we've perhaps never met in person. We're working across teams without direct authority. Really difficult, right? We're collaborating, clients, freelancers, using AI, etc., trying to get buy-in from people who have 100 different competing priorities. So, the old model of, well, I'm the boss, do as I say, is just disappearing. We have to kind of influence. So influence, I do think, is becoming the currency of modern work. And if you think about it, in a world where AI can generate ideas in seconds, knowledge is not knowledge is more democratized. And the person in power is not necessarily the one with all the knowledge. It's like somebody who knows what to do with that knowledge. So organizations kind of become flatter, careers are less predictable. So influence is the skill that's going to become much, much more valuable. So what is it? What are we talking about here? So for me, influence is simply your ability to help people feel differently, or to help them feel confident enough to act or move something forward. It's just the ability to make stuff happen, even if people don't necessarily report to you. So it's less about persuasion, although I do think those two things can go hand in hand, persuading and influencing. Yeah. But I think it's much more about trust. People are influenced by people they believe. You can have negative influences, obviously, but when you think about the people who have influenced you the most in the world, it'd be interesting. What do you come up with? It might be a parent figure, it might be a teacher, it might be a really fantastic boss who did things in a certain way. Yeah. But it's so the people, you don't have to be the loudest person in the room. In fact, that can be a little bit off-putting. You don't have to be the most senior, and often you don't even have to be the cleverest person in the room. So the people who I think consistently have influence are the ones who are credible, and in my view, kind of generous, calm, curious, reliable. The good news, I think, is that because none of those qualities depend on personality so much, they sort of they can be built. They're habits that can be built. I certainly think, well, I try to use my platform for good, my influence for good, or what I believe to be good. But I certainly, it can come in all any forms. Anyway, so if you want to grow your influence or build it, or thinking, how the heck do I start? Just to sort of think about, one, do a kind of little test and think, ask your friends, ask your colleagues, how would you describe me? Like, do I have influence? How do I influence you? What are your greatest influences? And I think, the qualities of somebody who's growing their influence are things like this, being interested in others or situations before trying to be interesting. So it's really that kind of absorbing, being curious. The second thing is kind of listen for what is really going on, not just what's being said. So this is like level 3 or 4 listening. It's like beyond words, beyond emotion. It's much more using your intuition, your spidey sense, looking for the big themes, reading in between the lines and all that kind of thing. Of course, what helps, number 3, is becoming known for something. If you're going to influence people, what is it that you are influencing them with. It's kind of, you kind of need a point of view or a value system or something that you're going to impact people with in terms of your influence. So I do think expertise in certain things is definitely a way to certain types of influence. People often, if you think about your musical influences, if you're a musician, etc., or your influences as an artist or whatever, you're normally thinking about people who've got particular skills. Other things I think, and it just goes into building trust, is say you'll do something and then actually do it. It really, really helps build trust. And then, the other thing I think really helps is like help other people succeed. Influence grows when people trust your intentions. And most importantly, probably the most important thing is to have the courage to speak up when it matters. I don't think you need to be the loudest voice in the room, but you do need to use your voice. It's very, very difficult to build influence if you are not visible or not audible. So it's really showing up, and having the courage to say something, to put your point of view across. So anyway, if you're thinking, oh yeah, okay, how am I doing, etc., etc., these are some of the questions to ask yourself. When people leave a meeting with you, what do they leave with? Are they taking away something of value, or are they more confused than they started with? Ideally, you want to be thinking, okay, what clarity, what confidence, what commitment, whatever, what have I kind of used in my presence there? In what way has it moved things forward? I like to think about influence in terms of like, were you a good meeting in that person's day? Have you given something to them that might be useful in terms of, I don't know, courage or ideas or enthusiasm, whatever it might be. Yeah. Will they talk about you later on that day? Or would you have just been like, just another meeting that they've forgotten about the minute you walk out of the door? You don't want to be like that. You want to be them talking about you positively later in the day and excited to have met you or seen you. Yeah. So ideally, if they talk about you later, if they share the ideas, if you've made an impact, it's likely that you'll have influenced them. Okay, so build your influence, guys. Really, really think about how you're doing now, how you can grow that skill, and what you want to do with that influence. What do you want to do with that influence? All right, take care. See you next week.